Hey everyone, Raghav here, and I just want to talk about a really interesting topic, something that's been on my mind, something that's been active in my consciousness for the past 10 years almost. And this goes back from when I was living in the US, and I saw incidents happen in the US which are bound to happen in India if we do not, get a handle on the situation, if we do not take preventative measures, and if we do not do certain things. Um, so exactly what I'm talking about is the lack of constructive societal discourse. This is something that's very prevalent in the US. A lot of US narrative is all about, like people taking sides, and there is divisive rhetoric, and there are these kinds of conversation that vilify the opponents. There is very lot of passion involved in the rhetoric, and I just feel like India is blindly importing these practices to this country, and we're basically on a time offset replication agenda over here. And that's really unfortunate because like India is not similar to the US in a lot of ways, and even if it is similar, the things that the US does, we should not be importing blindly for a, like to establish a capitalist or profitable agenda, right? I just think that it's something that we need to look at very carefully and create an original solution for the problems that we perceive with our own eyes in front of us. And this is what I think is important in solving the problem of societal discourse. Because we are having similar environment in this country as what exists in the US, where the rhetoric is very simplistic. It's oversimplified. It is portrayed to the audience as more as entertainment rather than informative content. And you always find that news is intertwined with narrative these days, and it's just unfortunate. And all of these systems are one-way broadcast. So this means that all the people at the receiving end of this, they don't have a voice to respond back to this narrative and let it evolve. So this whole power structure that I'm talking about is that there are sources of information that are being broadcast one way with absolute immunity from accountability or um, in any kind of like accountability or credibility even. And I just feel like this is creating a very toxic environment where few people have a power to influence the minds of the millions. And this is a very complex problem, first of all. So I want to talk about different facets of this and why we are seeing this happen in India. Now, if I look at my notes, I have a bunch of notes for this whole video. So India is filled with a certain kind of people. Actually, this is very similar to the US as well. US Americans are very passionate. We like to think of them as Westerners, but Americans are very passionate. They are more like Indians than anybody would think, because these outwardly they're very different. But in terms of emotions and sentiment, I feel like Americans and Indians are very similar. We all, I feel like we have good people across both the countries, and the storylines are very similar. The narratives are very similar, and the problem is that a lot of people are mere consumers in this whole information ecosystem. So people are merely consumers, and what ends up happening is that people are just blindly consuming information without questioning, because there is no point of questioning. There is no mechanism in place to respond back, and that has changed a lot over the past few years, as with social media platforms, with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. These channels have made participation more accessible. So there has been a shift in how we communicate as human beings, and there's definitely been a shift in the balance of power. So now everybody feels powerful. Like there are a lot more sources of information than there have been consistently. And this is a very, very recent phenomenon. I think people fail to realize how recent this is. In the scale of like human history, if you look at it, it's very, very recent. It's only the past decade, past couple of decades at the max. And you just have an environment where things are thriving, but then also I think we still have problems. Even with Facebook and Twitter and all these places, the quality of discourse is extremely low. Nobody goes online on Twitter to find interesting conversations happening. It's mostly mudslinging, mostly personal attacks, mostly just emotional transactions happening. There's no intellectual transactions, not a high large volume of intellectual transactions happening, and also it's really hard to find nuanced conversations happening. And this is something that I've recognized for a long time. And that's one of the reasons why I've managed to create a community called the Debate Club, where we gather to have discussions and conversations on controversial topics in a way that is like both intellectually nuanced and also more inclusive in terms of like, bringing in various perspectives without uh, favoring any one side. Because I think a broadcasting platform should be unbiased, and you have to set aside your personal preferences and just treat every human being as having the right to hold a point of view, at least to the scope of being able to express it freely. And I just feel like that is something that is still missing. It's really alarming that it's missing still. We've had like monumental progress made in terms of technology, but this mindset has kind of like not really evolved on par with what is possible technologically. I think that is one of my problem areas that I'm trying to solve, and I am doing a bunch of other things that to solve that. Maybe we'll discuss that at a future time. But let's talk more about the problem that we have in India in terms of the discourse. So one of something that I've already mentioned is that people are more like loyalists. They're more like consumers, but they're also more loyalists. They connect with important topics on an emotional dimension. So they tend to have preferences because emotions work like that. Emotions, they don't want to change too often. If you're loyal to somebody, then it is more likely that you'll be loyal, even at the face of mild or moderate evidence against something. It's only when things go really extreme that you are willing to have a very powerful emotional moment that you may change your mind about something. So, and I think that India in specific has people who are very, very emotional by nature. We have very exuberant people. I mean, this is not a negative thing. A lot of people automatically associate emotionality with some kind of a negative thing. But the truth is that it's a different kind of a power. If you know how to handle it, you can actually mold it into a powerful movement that can resonate with a lot of people, because emotion is um, it's a very powerful lubricant in society. So it's a great way for people of various backgrounds to come together and mingle, and that happens a lot in India. India is a country where you can rub shoulders with various strata of societies, various strata of like personal evolution, and it's a it's a very it's a very different kind of a power, because like most of the powerful nations in the world, people are not known for being so emotional, except for maybe the US. I think most of Europe has a perception of being very dispassionate and stoic in nature. But India is not like that. India, the population is very, very emotionally charged. And that kind of like brings its own challenges when it comes to intellectual discourse, because discourse requires dispassion. And that's one of the reasons why when you turn on the TV in India, it's always people shouting at each other, people very, very passionately biased. about a lot of things. They are very loyal to whatever they believe is right. I'm not really sure what goes on behind the scenes. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in taking personal attacks on any particular organization, because the problem is systemic. There is no point in pointing at an individual and saying that this is something that's problematic. Let me fix this. So the problem is that in a country like India, we need special solutions. We can't simply directly import, systems that were designed for the West. The Silicon Valley products are they're all very similar in how they think. And I think there's been a cultural hegemony because of the concentration of these platforms in one culture that thinks in a very specific way. I think there is room for innovation, and I think that is something that's really necessary for India. I think that in India, if a product ought to succeed, it makes sense for whoever is designing the product to have lived in this space, and the solution basically stems from deep observations made about the society at a very fundamental level. And I think it also requires a different way of thinking. The Western way of thinking is very objective, and I think that you need to have a certain level of subjective introspection and subjective evolution for you to also mix in this other thing that goes well with that objective way of thinking. The objective way of thinking is not something that is unique to the West. We can have objective thinking anywhere in the world, but we need to mix that with highly evolved subjective insight, and that is something that is missing from what I can sense from these products. Now, I mean, this is something that kind of like is close to me because like I've been working on products. They're in the very earliest stages, so I'm working on those products that are meant to solve these problems. But here, I just want to give you a sense of like how I see the problem. And I've talked about how India is filled with loyalists, and there is also a surprising absence of original thinking. I just feel like the Indian people are not really incentivized enough to have original thinking, because we grow up in this education system where obedience and unquestioning obedience and just no protest obedience, that is what is like favored. Nobody likes to be questioned. Nobody likes asking questions here. I feel like we suppress it at a very early enough stage that people tend to dismiss their instinct to want to question. I think that we have a very extremely high threshold to bullshit as a society, and that is problematic, and that is leading us to not having sufficient life experience, because the education system by design is taking away your time that you have for yourself into putting you through a conveyor belt where it is meant to shape you into whatever the society needs. You as a subjective entity have no scope for evolution, because you've never had to make decisions as a subjective human being, because everything is made for you. So you have no way to exercise your agency, and therefore you have an absence of original thinking. And this is my understanding, at least. And I think that is something that is very detrimental, and that is something this has to be fixed for us to have like proper standards of societal discourse, because you need large volumes of original thinkers in society for there to be a rich discourse involving multiple perspectives, where people are mature enough to be dispassionate and informed enough to be deeply considerate in forming a point of view, forming a stance. So there are systemic issues that lead to this low standard of public discourse in this country. Now, the other thing is that, like I said, the lack of life experience. I feel like if you have highly evolved individuals, and evolution of an individual depends heavily on your wisdom, and wisdom comes from experience. So if you have a lot of life experiences where you get to, as an average citizen, you get to travel in different parts of the world, and you have exposure to different cultures, and you've lived your life in a very fulfilling way, these are the times when an individual flourishes and prospers. So until you have prosperity in an economic sense, you're not going to have a highly mature society filled with individuals who are capable of original thinking and you know broadening of scope of concern, right? Most people in India today, like, just they're happy if their home is fulfilled. They don't care so much about the larger society because that is their scope of concern. And this is something that will change once people have more fulfilling lives. And that is something that I'm definitely foreseeing. But we have to do things in order to solve these problems. Now, coming to what can we do about this, right? The There's no point in discussing a problem unless you have a certain, at least preliminary hypothesis pointing towards solutions. I think this is actually one of the tenets of constructive discourse, is that you're not interested in purely pointing fingers at what the problem is and just have a, you know, offensive rhetoric on the problem. But instead of pointing fingers, let's actually have a closer look at what is wrong, and let's try to arrive at a solution at the end. That is the point of a constructive discourse. And the thing about this is that, like I said, I have a couple of products that I believe are solutions. One of them is the Debate Club. The Debate Club is a community of individuals who wish to come and engage with the other side. And, we've had very successful sessions of us talking about, us as a online community, talking about controversial topics in a very sensitive and safe intellectual space. And we do these on voice calls. We don't do this on text. That's something that is very unique about our platform. So information on this is available at thedebateclub.info is our official website URL. And if you go there, you can have a look at our YouTube channel where we have information about our previous, basically recordings of our previous sessions, and you can have a look at the quality of conversations that we have over there. And this is a very interesting product because we actually did this as a weekend project to just to validate for a different product that we're working on. And it turned out to be such a tremendous success that it kind of demands its own product. So we're actually building a software product for this. But that aside, this exercise that I've been running for the past 8 months. So we've been running the Debate Club for the past 8 months. We have a team that runs this. And what we've realized is that this problem is very much solvable. And also, this problem is not something that only I'm thinking about. There's a fair number of people who really, really value uh, high quality public discourse. And that is something that we've been able to achieve on a very small scale. We have about 750 members who are part of the community, and we have about a few hundred members on WhatsApp, which is where most of the interactions happen on text, and then we have Zoom meetings, which gather about like 30 people or sometimes 15 people, whatever. And we anticipate the volume of participation to increase over time as we build out a software product to do this. And other than this, I think what we as individuals can do to improve the quality of discourse in society is be unapologetic in representing ourselves. Don't be afraid. Don't be um, discouraged by people treating you poorly because of what you believe in. You should still unapologetically um, represent yourself so that you can have a meaningful discussion on things that matter to you. If we can establish a safe space for people to do this, only then society can evolve, because that is what is required. That honest introspection and communication is extremely important for a society to evolve. And that is probably the starting point for changing the situation in India. I feel like all of us should be very respectful in how we represent our point of view, because if you're saying what you want to say and you're met with hostility, it makes you want to say it less. So, if you want to create an environment where everybody is allowed to speak their mind, then you need to be respectful of the other side. So, no matter who it is that you disagree with, if you disagree with them, if you can do it respectfully, it furthers the dialogue in a lot more meaningful way. And I see that is something that is very challenging in a country like India, because, like I said, people are very passionate here. There's a lot of disrespect in the air, and especially in online spaces, it's very rampant. So I think that it starts with a few people voluntarily signing up to be this new wave of Indian citizens who are respectful to the other side and who are openly engaging in mature public discourse where intellectual nuance is respected and incentivized and appreciated. So that's all I have the time for today. These are all things that I've been thinking about, and I just wanted to share it, put it in out there. So if you thought something about this, please put a comment so that I can know what I'm coming across as. To be honest, I have no idea how this is going to come across as. I don't know if there's something that I'm doing that is distracting, or there is something that is awful, needs to be fixed. I would love to know. So thank you so much for joining. Bye.